Hello, thank you for coming. It's a lot of light coming at me, but this is cool. Thanks for coming to my session. I'll get started. So, a little bit about myself. I tend to move around, so I'm just gonna see if I can move this mic rope here. I've been in the cyber industry for almost 25 years now. Just kind of rounded up a little bit, but been in a variety of different roles. Been really super. I consider myself lucky to be around so many people that have been smarter than me, and because of that, made me smarter. And so started off on the other side of things, and in the financial and insurance industry. One gentleman that's here somewhere I used to work with as well, is here as well, and back in my early days at Allstate Insurance. As a security engineer, and then spent about 10 years, kind of got my hands in a lot of different security technologies, engineering, dealt with some pretty interesting incidents as well back in the day, and then moved over into the cybersecurity tech world, right? So then moved over to the security architecture, specialist in various different products. Got into product management and did cybersecurity product, build outs and, development of cyber products, which is pretty cool. And those are specifically focus on SIM, and then got into the world of threat intelligence. That was about 10 years ago, and then have kind of never looked back. And it was kind of like one of these things where it's the world of intelligence is a dirty business, but it's kind of interesting too. And then did cyber and did product management for an NDR solution. It's called Threat Insight, if anyone cares to know. And so that is my world in cups and tumblers and whatever you want to call them. The only one that's missing is Allstate. I didn't get one. Maybe we had one back in the day. I don't know. Yeah, they gave shirts, but yeah. But that's my world, and that's actually, I have all of those sitting on my windowsill in my office. So that's a current picture, from Symantec to Mandiant and FireEye, Recorded Future, Gigamon, and then I have my own company now. So I have my own security operations and threat intelligence company now. So been very fortunate, but yeah, I'm passionate about blue teams. Threat intel, my latest thing, and I've had a lot of time now. And in the height of the pandemic, I was doing a lot of stuff on the blockchain and crypto and various different, playing around, messing around with like staking and all these types of mining and validator nodes. And if anyone wants to kind of chat about that, come afterwards and we could chat. That's like a side thing for me. But another fun fact. Before cyber, I was a personal trainer, if anyone could believe that, and then I quickly realized there was no money in that. So then I switched over into cyber. All right, let's get started. So we're going to talk about 3 topics today, and hopefully it'll be a little different from your normal AI topics. AI everyone talks about it, but hopefully I can kind of put a little bit of applicability to how it's been used in my world and maybe you can take some things back to your own workplace as well. And then also attribution, which can be important depending on your goals. But I would say for most organizations, attribution really doesn't play a big factor. It does play a big factor on the other side. If you actually work for a cyber company, if you work for an intelligence company, because we have to understand who the bad guys are. But from the customer perspective, really, unless if you work for an extremely large organization, and I'll get into that too, like why it matters, etc. But yeah, I mean, these are all definitions. It's not my own definitions. They're just literally just definitions that I pulled out that I thought they were good definitions, right? From, NIST.gov for threat intel. I'm not going to just read these. You guys can read yourself. And then the other ones are from Oxford Language Dictionaries, online version, on really, what that is, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more detail on what that all is, right? So 3 types of threat intelligence. these can kind of be a little different based on everyone's, definitions. But from my own experiences in school of training from others in the industry, there's really three types, and I'm sure some of you guys can maybe kind of call them. Can anyone guess what they are? Guess any of them? Any type of intelligence? Anyone? Good guess. Good guess. So let's start with tactical, right? So that's mainly for the most part, what an analyst will deal with, right? Like it's actually like the actual stuff, right? The actual like the indicators, right? Like it's the domains, the IP addresses, the malware name, the file name, the hashes, URLs, like the actual stuff that you're going to see in a SIM, and like an endpoint alert. Like that's the actual tactical intelligence. You got to do something with that thing, right? Like, and what is that? It's not so much like what or where it's coming. It's just like, okay, there's this indicator. Okay, it's tactical, but you got to do something with it. And there's an analyst touch to it. That's typically what you call tactical intelligence. So the next level, operational. If you guys, and I'm sure many of you or most of you have heard of MITRE ATT&CK, right? Pretty common framework out there for what's been, I think it got released in 2017, maybe almost 5-6 years now. But that's where that kind of plays, right? The operational is like the tactics, the techniques, the procedures. They have it really nicely laid out all the way from reconnaissance, and then they created a new the last impact stage. It used to be reconnaissance to exfiltration, and then there was a new one called impact that came out like last year or something like that. But if you get into that, right, that's where intelligence starts to play a little bit of a larger role, and the SOC and the blue teams typically will touch that and need to understand that from more the advanced perspective. But it'll be more like just kind of applying this is typically like the tier 2s or the tier 3s are just trying to understand a little bit more and to get through the next stages of analysis. And you need a little bit more data to be able to kind of get to that level. It's not just that one thing. All of a sudden, it's just like numerous indicators to get to that, right? To be able to understand those tactics and techniques and procedures. Lastly, you've got the strategic, right? So typically, strategic really, you're not gonna like, it's typically like the executives, the leadership, they're gonna wanna know, right? Like who is after like my organization? Why am I a target? Why are they after me? What are these guys trying to get? What are their motivations? Why like time and time like I've talked to I used to work with global accounts, my prior companies, et cetera, and large companies like Fayyaz, we're like, we make, take like John Deere or Caterpillar, right? Like who's after us? Why do we're like, we're in manufacturing and we're, we have cranes and, well, guess what? There is, threat actors after them. And why? It's not the financials, it's more their intellectual property, right? It's how they make those designs and how they make, or say Boeing, right? Like there's actual, the Chinese, perfect example. I'm not trying to discriminate, but like there's specific areas and regions where they're after specific companies because they want to take those blueprints and literally mimic, and that happens, right? That literally happens. Like you take Ford, for example, and just kind of a little tangential, but Ford, if anyone has ever look them up, it's just public domain information. There was a Chinese espionage actor that worked at Ford for years, like literally years, until he was indicted and then was extradited to go back, right? But that's pretty normal, right? Because like there's literally just pilfering data, taking that data from, as an internal insider, taking it back so that, they don't have to do their own R&D, and now all of a sudden things are cheaper for them to build that same thing, right? So that's the strategic intelligence. Like it's not like this one thing, but it's like understanding the who and why and their motivations in the landscape and the context of the why. And typically it's the CISO or the strategic or the executives of the leadership that are going to want to know that, so then they can understand what they're up against and they can better equip themselves to be able to defend against the bad guy, right? That's what you're talking about when you're talking about strategic intelligence. All right, let's get into AI. So I've kind of like segregated this into each area. We'll talk about attribution, then we'll kind of try to see if we can put it all together. So yeah, big topic, right? I mean, there's so many forms of AI, and it's just like, you know, and I'll get into that a little bit more outside of just, it's such a large, you know, there's algorithms, there's models, there's analytics. Well, there's a lot that goes into artificial intelligence, right? So let's just dive right in. Like, you know, a part of artificial intelligence is machine learning, right? And like machine learning has been around for a long time. Like everyone uses it to some way, shape, or form. And it's not just the applicability in cyber, but it's like literally every industry uses it for like just literally just taking data, taking an input, applying tags to it, and then processing. And there's usually a level of human element involved with machine learning. Like you're not just gonna get like, you put in an input and you just get like an output. You're not just gonna get like a nice clean version of like, oh yeah, like just think about like cats and dogs. If you take an input into a system and say, hey, you gotta label them, all of a sudden like you're gonna come back and is it all gonna be like cats and dogs? Are they gonna know? Like there's some level of applicability with the human. Usually with machine learning, it usually deals with smaller amounts of data, right? When you get into deep learning is when you start looking at additional networks of data and additional correlations, and you need vast amounts of data. And that's when like you start to kind of get into the aspect of like, okay, well, maybe you don't need a human there, right? And maybe you're actually getting some information back that there is less human interface there because you're dealing with lots of larger data sets to be able to do that level of deep learning, right? And then you get a little bit deeper. And then of course, and then now you've got like this whole explosion of Gen AI where now you actually have a human interface where you're just talking to AI and having like a conversation, right? To be able to get a response back. Right? And then even from that perspective, right? So for the purposes of this talk, I didn't get a chance. I did a lot of research in some of the generative AI models. Of course, GPT being the most popular one, so I had to touch that. But then also my touch points were specifically for focuses on threat intelligence. So I focused on, you guys will have to do your own research in Ada, Curie, Da Vinci. There's a lot of them out there. I just kind of gave you some samplings here. But my focus is on GPT 3.5, GPT-4, Perplexity, and Copilot. So has anyone ever like played around with any of them other than like GPT? Yeah, probably other ones too. Any other ones like that could be interesting? I'm curious. Which one? Which one? Mixtral. Okay. All right. 7B. Wizard. Okay. Yeah, it's cool to kind of check out and see these different models and good to hear, right? Because like some of them have better applicability in the world of cyber versus others don't, right? So it's kind of cool to see that. So let's kind of take a step back and talk about threat intel with AI for a second here. So we've all dealt with atomic and computed IOCs, I'm sure, like if you're in the world of cyber, but I don't know if you really like thought of them that way, but like that's like the actual term for them, right? So if you think about like, you know, if you're dealing with an IP and domain and URL, like those are atomic IOCs, right? Like the key thing around atomic is basically it's just like you have that one indicator, but it's very dynamic, right? Like it's like I would say aside from like IP addresses are, but they're like probably like lesser, like the least dynamic out of the other ones, but domain names got like just constant. It's churn, especially when you deal with fast flux, etc. URLs, of course, worked at a threat intelligence company and geez, like saw millions and millions of like, it gets insane, right? But it's basically like it's these forms of intelligence, right? They're atomic IOCs and you use them in the world of investigation, response, et cetera, too. And then computed is basically like they're mathematical like algorithms, right? To actually, what you see is what you get. That's not changing. Like that's not like versus with atomic, it could be brittle in nature, right? And it can change constantly. But computed is like, that's what it is. Like if you're whitelisting something or blacklisting something, if you're doing that with atomic, then you better be continually like looking at that to change it or make sure that that's like updated, right? But if you whitelist or if you're whitelisting or blacklisting like computed IOCs, you're gonna have a better chance of like knowing that that's just bad. Like you're good with it. There's not gonna be, you're not gonna have like the issue of like false positives as much, right? Because this is, unless if you got like some weirdness or blip in the wire where it's just kind of changed the hash and all of a sudden it's like, oh, but typically that's what it is, right? So you got to be very careful with those atomic ones, right? And for the most part, you're dealing with that, right? Because you don't really hear people like, at least I don't know, like it's maybe people do, but like blacklisting is kind of a thing of the past. Like I don't know, like you're not really like sitting there like putting like indicators or in like a blacklist. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone do that? Does anyone use a blacklist? I'm curious. Maybe whitelisting, I would see that because you just want to have like a known good, right? But blacklisting, I don't know. So the next thing is like, how do you get to that next part of hunting and detections, right? Well, what's interesting is you got to really take. Oh, there you go. You got to take both of those, right? You got to take the atomic and computed. And then there is a process that happens, right, where you're looking at and matching these IPs and pairs with the computed indicators, and then actually hunting or forming some type of theories around, hey, this specific thing, I feel like that is a nefarious activity or a bad activity occurring from these domains, and that domain is bringing on this specific thing, and that thing is calling out to that IP, right? It's some type of thing that you're trying to prove out, and that's really what a hunt is. You're just proving out a theory, right? And then if that hunt is successful and you're finding stuff consistently, then guess what? That turns into detection, right? That's typically how any like solution, a cybersecurity like in its raw, rarest form works. Right? You do that and you come to a conclusion, and if you can consistently be repetitive about it, you create a detection. Once the detection is created, then you're continually finding those detections, and it's just like a cyclical cycle. Then you do another hunt. It's constant. It's just constant, right? And that used to be a manual process until the world of AI came along, and then there's algos to it, machine learning models, and then some companies claim they do deep learning, right? And then now there's this other aspect of generative AI where now they're starting to embed that into their whole processes to actually make that better. But guess what? The bad guys are doing the same thing, right? So it's just like, are we really ahead of them? Debatable, right? Probably not. So let's talk about, so we talked about that. So I'm going to do some just quick tests against against an IP address. And this is purely like tools I have access to. And like also, this is proprietary. It's nothing in here is OSINT. I will get to OSINT in a second here. But from the tool sets, it's kind of nice to use like paid tools and be able to, because they have access to other paid intelligence, and they're buying feeds from other sourcing, and they have other forms of AI that they may have had to purchase, right? So there's additional forms of things you can get there, and also there's the labeling aspect too, which is kind of nice to be able to just easily get an indicator. That's actually a bad. I wouldn't, I don't know as of today, but that is an actual bad IP as of last week. So look at that at your own risk if you want to actually go to the IP address. That is scattered spider campaign that was occurring and possibly still occurring right now around the casinos and that whole industry. But that's actually just, that's how that looks. It's pretty easy. It's nice. Put an IP. Oh, that's scattered spider. That is definitely bad. And then another tool that we have access to, and this is kind of, I just did I don't know if you could look at it, it just kind of, I wrote down, can you give me IOCs for scattered spider? And it just boom puts out like all the domains, right? Like these are it. So it's kind of cool. Right? It's just, and that's just in its rarest form. That's tactical intelligence, labeled, nice, clean. You have it, and now you just make sure that you apply it in your controls so that users aren't just going to that, right? And even from an investigation scenario, it would be nice to know, right? Because if you're doing an investigation, you find one of these indicators, you know that you need to take some remediation actions, right? This is OSINT. This is if anyone's played around with passive DNS over here. Anyone played around with passive DNS? Do you know what passive DNS is? Anyone? No? Yeah.
Historical record of DNS resolutions.
Exactly. Yeah. Historical records of DNS resolutions. Why is that important? Well, it is because if you look at just in general the vast amount of like IP addresses and domain names out there, like if you just do a quick lookup on something, you'll get that lookup at that point in time. But again, what did I just say earlier, right? It's very dynamic. It's very brittle. It's always changing. So you need to go back from a security perspective, an investigation perspective, to have that historical database. The mnemonic is a pretty good tool. I've used it for a while now. Just you look it up online. And so I did a quick search, OSINT search on that IP address. And so like that's like so for my eyes, that's like pretty clear that there's something wrong here, right? Why is that? Well, number one, if you look at that IP address and you look at those domains, there's literally just four different domain names. One says a VPN address. And they're all, if you look at time and date stamps become very important in the world of investigation. If you look at that, right, they're all very new. 3/22/2024, all of them, only 4 records, right? And if anyone's played around with DNS, you usually get a lot more than that. You don't get just that much. That's it. There's nothing else on this. So like immediately that's a red flag. Like, okay, there's these 4 domains on that one IP address, and that's it. Now let's do a quick check, right? So corp charter, right? So check out charter.net, right? What's charter.net about? All right, hold on. That's DNS in reality. That's how things should look, right? So if you look, I got 16 pages of charter.net. And if you look closer at the dates there, they're like, charter.net has lived on numerous different IP addresses, right? Which is pretty normal. Like you see, like it's, the domain names tend to resolve to different like houses, right? It's just not always in the same one. The analogy I like to give is like, if you live like in an apartment building, right? There's this huge building, right? And now usually, what are the chances of the entire like building being filled with bad guys? Like, there's all these little apartments in the building. Like there's all like 20 different apartments. And those are like, the different, think of them as like different domain names, right? Everyone has their own name. And you're living in that apartment. The apartment has a big IP address. This is one big jumbo IP. It's one big address. You live there in 22 Norman Lane, whatever it is, I don't know, right? And then that's the analogy, right? Like not every person in that building is going to be bad. Going back to here, right? Pretty clear that one person, there's this one building and there's this one unit there, and that's bad. But here, right, or not one unit, 4 units, they're all bad, fine. Over here, there's like, it's not like that. And this is pretty normal where you have numerous different domains. Well, in this situation, it's charter, but you can have other domains here too living on those IP addresses. If I was to do a search, I didn't do it in here, but if I was to do a search on any one of those IP addresses, I should get other domain names in there too. Right? Does that make sense? Like I should get, like I just did a search on charter.net. Now the reverse would be is you do a search on that IP address and see who else is living there, right? And then you get a quick search. And that's how you do, this is literally just DNS hunting. This is how you hunt, right? And it's just kind of to kick things off a little bit. But it was this comparison to show you what DNS in reality looks like. All right, let's take a look at Gen AI in application. So this is ChatGPT 3.5. Typically, most of the world uses 3.5 because it's free, it's easy. You just go to OpenAI, you just start putting in your questions, and you just get it. My wife uses it. Everyone uses it, right? Anyone that does it, like, it's just there, right? In the world of cybersecurity, it kind of sucks. If you look at it, like, it's just like very generic. Like I asked, what is scattered spider? It had no idea. And it just, because of course, there's a date to that, right? Because ChatGPT, I think it just like 2022 is like the latest database of what it has. So it's not really relevant. I mean, especially in the world of threat intelligence, like you need like you you need stuff that's like what's relevant today, like what's relevant this minute, especially in threat. It's kind of like think about like the news channel. Like if you're gonna go to CNN or Fox, and if you're gonna watch something on Fox that was aired 3 weeks ago, is that really relevant to you? No. You want to know what's happening in the now, right? So it doesn't really relate in the world of CTI. Like you could use it for some things, like more generic stuff. If you want to learn stuff about threat intelligence, like what is threat intelligence? Sure, it's going to give you a good answer, right? Right. But if you want to like know something about like an active campaign that I'm trying to research, like it's just going to barf on you. It's just going to be like, oh yeah, it's going to be generic stuff about like oh yeah, it might be culture and literature and pop. Like it was just useless. Now 4 is interesting. So I actually, in my own lesson learned that you guys may benefit from now, little secret. So I paid $20 for ChatGPT 4, right? Because you got to pay $20 for this. And then I went and explored Copilot. So Copilot, GPT-4 is actually included in Copilot in their free version. So if you actually, so I tested with Copilot later on, I got the same answer, exactly the same answer, and I didn't have to pay anything. So I just lost $20. But for you guys, good. But the key thing is that it only allows you to do like a limited amount of searches, and it's like on off-peak hours, it utilizes it. So typically it's pretty good for just random like things. If you want to just like operationalize it, if you want to continuously like heavily use it, then you probably have to buy their subscription to, or just buy GPT-4. But just letting you know, if you wanna use GPT-4, just go to Copilot and you get it. You'll be able to just use it. So that's a good answer. It's a little bit of a better answer. It's not like great, but at least it knew a little bit about scattered spider. Well, actually, no. Actually, sorry. It didn't really know anything about scattered spider. It gave me a generic answer, but it knew about operational intelligence. Like it just knew like what operational intelligence is. Like it gave me like more generic. But if you like closely look, it just says like operational intelligence on a group like scattered spider involves understanding their blah 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 blah. So you just kind of generalize again, right? Okay, so let's go to the next one. I tried the same thing with strategic intelligence, same thing, same crap. Like, all right, strategic intelligence regarding blah, 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 like scattered spider. It didn't give me the specifics. Like, I want to know about scattered spider. Like, tell me about them. Don't tell me about, like, generic stuff about, like, what strategic intelligence is. I could just, like, the question could have just been, can you give me what strategic intelligence is? And it would have been the same answer, and they would have just removed the scattered spider. It would have been the same answer. Like, it's just pretty generic. All right, I did the same thing with, I tried to go a little bit, like I tried to probe a little bit more and ask, like, give me IOCs, and same thing again, pretty generic. Oh yeah, email and phishing IOCs, blah, 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 suspicious senders, and, look at this and look at that, like pretty generic. I thought about another tool, Perplexity. This is kind of cool. Like, I was pretty shocked. I just did this one like literally like today morning, actually, I did this one. And I had to put it in because a friend told me about it. And he's like, oh, try Perplexity. So I tried it, and I was like, wow, it's pretty cool. Like, it's still not like what I want, but it gives me sources. And in the world of Intel, you want sources. So it actually tells me like, okay, yeah, there's some sources here from Lookout, and it's, yeah, CISA, CrowdStrike, 2 more in there. So I can click into them and then actually get the data and get the actual indicators that I want. So that's kind of cool, right? It's like, and it gives me like, so it doesn't get, so, going back to the other, like the proprietary intelligence, I don't know if you saw that, but actually give me domains, actual specifics. Like this one just at least told me that, hey, you might want to look at like Okta and Microsoft Office 365 VPN. So it gave me a little bit of specific, but not actual, but at least it's giving me down the path of like where I need to go, right? So it's better than the normal applications that I tried before. So that's cool. So, okay. Oh yeah, this is highlighting it. So phishing domains, malware hashes. It did have some like other sources. If you click into those numbers, it'll give you those sources, which is kind of nice. And then other IOCs too. So I don't know how much anyone has explored like MITRE ATT&CK. There's a lot to unpack there, right? So this is getting into operational intelligence now. There's a section in MITRE ATT&CK, if you haven't checked it out, go into the group section in MITRE ATT&CK, and then there's an attack navigator, right? So like people just kind of look at MITRE ATT&CK, yeah, cool, tactics and procedures, etc., right? But if you go into a little bit more deeper, they actually have Scatter Spider updated. So they're updating it consistently. It's a pretty new campaign. And it, I just kind of copied and pasted in there to show it to you guys. But that's basically, I apply the navigator to it, Scatter Spider, and told me exactly what tactics Scatter Spider uses. So you got to go in a little bit, but it actually applies it. And then now you can use this as a detection framework, right, for your tools, right? So you can actually kind of go in a little bit deeper and actually start detecting against this. If you know that you're a casino and you may be hit by them, and you can kind of customize your tools and do some further digging and create some detection logic to look for those specific techniques, right? So then all of a sudden, you know immediately that, hey, because typically you don't want to rely on your main tools to be able to detect everything for you. I'm sorry to cut it to you. You're not gonna you're not gonna be happy if you're just relying on what they're giving you out of the box. You're gonna have to do some work to actually find the bad guys. This is what it is. But so that's kind of cool. So you should definitely check that out. And then moving into strategic intelligence, right? So these are actually older reports. So I do have access to some strategic intelligence from the March one, but I'm not at the liberty of sharing it. But these are just, I wanted to show you, this is just pure OSINT strategic intelligence. But if you work with any organization that actually deals with these types of campaigns and works with this type of work, then you should be able to get, like they're typically like, there's a TLP Amber report that I have access to, but it's more like you have to kind of work with intel organizations to be able to get more. And so basically what I'm saying is like, this is still good, right? This is, and I did not get this from Gen AI, right? It did not work out for me. Like I had to do some OSINT and kind of find these reports through CISA and FSI SAC. Again, not the best, right? You have to work with organizations to be able to get the most current stuff and might have to pay some money for it. But at least it gets me to a point where I know what Scatter Spider is. I know who they are. I know what the motivations are. I know and many times what ends up happening, especially in this case too, again, they kind of change their tactics again, right? They're going after some different specific entities, and they've changed their procedures a little bit. So you want to know that if you're up against them, you don't want to go against like older stuff, but at least it's something to kind of give you an idea about who you're up against and who the adversaries are, right? And what do you have to do to defend against them? That's the key thing here, right? Attribution, last thing. It's usually the first thing that, like, I don't know, like, I just feel like it's like always the first question that's asked by the leadership, like, who was it? Like, or just like, it's just like, but it's like the last thing you're ever going to find out. Like, sorry, you're not going to find out who it is. This is what it is. Like, it's the last question that's going to get answered, if it even gets answered, right? Threat intelligence in general, I would say more specifically, tactical intelligence is foundational. Like you just have to get that right. If you don't, then you're just pretty much screwed. Like if you don't get that lower level right, you're just going to go down a path of like bad intelligence on top of bad intelligence, and all of a sudden you're going to be like just in a land where you don't want to be, a land of hurt, right? And you just need a lot of information to assess and start pointing fingers to someone, right? You just can't like say, oh, it was him, right? It was like you just can't do that. Like it's just there's no such thing as quick attribution. It's what it is. Like, just working at larger companies that do this stuff and kind of understanding attacker tradecraft and looking at like the Chinese and looking at the Russians and looking at like, there was never a time where we did work and I work with Intel analysts where it was just like, yeah, like it took months to be able to understand that level of attribution. And typically like an end user customer is just not doing that. They're not going to want to know that unless there's specific reasons why they need to know. They just want to get to a clean state of health. They want to just get back to be operational and run their business. They don't really care about like, why, So let's get into confidence levels of attribution and why this is hard, right? So if anyone tells you, or any vendor, how much time do we have? Oh, are we at time? Oh. Okay, all right. All right, so I'll just blow past this stuff. But basically, there's attributions. You gotta like kind of link things together. Domain zeros to IPs, and there's like there's this lowness factor to highness factor of like that you can attribute, but you just don't want to like go off of like one specific thing and say, oh yeah, that's that person. No, like you don't. If someone tells you that, then run because that's not the case, right? Gen I does not equal attribution. And kind of proved that out earlier, but I wasn't really getting to attribution, but some more specific questions I asked, right? Give me who threat actor, blah, blah, blah. Nope, couldn't do it. Associations with malicious activity, club chart. Nope, I don't know. And then just quick pivots, like just OSINT for tactical. I'm just sharing my quick sheet of bookmarks that if you guys want to take a look, took the lazy way out and I didn't go in and actually copy links, but that's my own bookmarks that I use quickly just to do some quick OSINT on tactical. This is domains, IPs, malware, hashes. Is this just a quick one that you guys want to kind of check out? I'd highly recommend checking it out. And then just kind of pivot points, right? From email to IP to domain, file download, C2. And then just quick summary. Again, basic thing, tactical is foundation, right? And closing thoughts, right? The only time you want to do attribution is like litigation, national security issue, or if it's just a large investigation, right? This one thing is happening everywhere in the world. There's something that criminal ring has to go down, and like feds get involved and others are involved, then yeah, attribution must happen, right? And typically, last thing I'll close with is that I've heard from my experience in being in this industry for so long, I've learned one thing or two things. Intel analysts many times don't know cyber. They're really good at intel, and vice versa. Like it's hard to find cyber guys also that know the actual intelligence process of actually collection and analysis and dissemination. Like if you can find guys, if you're a hiring manager, if you find people that can do both, then pick them up because that's a really unique and good skill set to have to know both threat intelligence and cybersecurity. That's it. Thank you guys. Sorry for running long.